to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Ben Paglia. I'm the Managing Director of AKEA Life. We're one of the clinical testing partners here at Liverpool John Lennon Airport, offering COVID testing, fit to fly, 5-day test and release, alongside the Test Assurance Group and Salutaris. We've been working here now since December last year, offering the services for passengers who want to travel out, and obviously for some passengers coming back. We've had quite a big uptake since the travel ban's been lifted back in early May, and we're hoping that with things moving forward and more countries coming onto the green list, hopefully at the next review, we'll be getting even busier.
How easy is it to actually do the testing, and how easy is it to book?
Our booking is really straightforward, so we have a booking page that's actually linked off the airport's website, and it's easy to find. All of the appointments that are available come up. You can book Monday through to Sunday at various different times. Appointment slots are approximately 5 minutes long. Once you've booked, you'll get your ticket through, which has all of the necessary information to find where you're going. When you arrive, you just present the staff with your ticket, your QR code. That gets scanned in, tells the staff obviously who you are, what test you've come for. They just cross-reference your identity with some photo ID to make sure you are who you say you are, and then they go and do the test in one of our bays. So it takes about 5 minutes from when you arrive, or about 10 minutes from getting into the car park to getting back into the car. So we like to think it's pretty straightforward.
Now, you do this just before you fly, or is it after you fly, or how's it done?
So as a general rule, and you do have to check this with each country that you're flying to, it's usually 72 hours before you travel. You will have to have had a proof of a negative COVID PCR. PCR is the type of test that we're using here to identify whether someone has or hasn't got COVID. Most people book in 3, maybe 2 days beforehand to give themselves plenty of time to get their results back, and that then allows them to travel out on that ticket. Travelling back is different. It's not something that we obviously can do because you're already in a different country. You do quite regularly have to get a test to travel back into the UK. You'll have to work with sort of the destination that you're going to find out where to get that from. And then when you come home, there's obviously a couple of tests you can and usually have to do as well. But in terms of what we do here, it's pretty much all fit to fly, pre-travel, and we do some 5-day test and release as well.
Do you do just normal members of the public, or is it business? Is there any specific market that can book?
It's everybody, so pretty much anyone who needs a test, who thinks that this would be a convenient location. We're a very reputable company. We've been in healthcare for about 30 years as a group. We've got a lot of experience. We've not just jumped into COVID because it suits us. We've been working in COVID since the beginning, and our services offered to absolutely everyone. I'd say the majority of the work's been business travellers, obviously for the last few months, because that's pretty much the only group of people who've been able to fly. And since sort of 17th of May, that's changed now, and we've gone more to the families who want to travel to usually Portugal, obviously because they're on the green list. So it's families now looking for a trip abroad.
Can you tell us a bit more about your background?
Yeah, of course. So myself, I started with my own healthcare company about 8 years ago. I left the pharmaceutical a marketing role, decided I wanted to try something myself. So it seemed a natural fit, having worked in healthcare for a long period of time. My wife was a nurse, my brother-in-law was a GP. We had a lot of people in the family who were in the healthcare sector, so I had a really good insight into maybe what opportunities looked like at the time, which is how we started off with the business as it was. How we've kind of got to this point, and not to sort of be opportunists, so to speak, but we were invited by the laboratory we were working with at the time for a lot of the blood testing that we did, to start doing COVID tests for any of our patients that needed them. And obviously what people have to remember is at the beginning, back in March last year, there was no community testing. So if you thought you had COVID, you either had to go to a hospital to get checked for it, or you didn't find out, or you had a private test. So the private testing market started very quickly because the government weren't that fast to respond with a community testing program. Obviously over time that changed, and then opportunities opened up in the private sector. So we don't do any NHS work, we only do private work. and we built up quite a reputation now around COVID testing. And we've done all sorts of things, from obviously travel, like you see here, to corporate testing, lateral flow testing, and sort of everything in between. We brought in a lot of specialisms to help us along the way, so we have consultant virologists that help the team now make sure that we work in the best way possible. And yeah, I mean, COVID's become one of our specialisms as a business, so it's been a natural progression because we had the heritage in healthcare before, and all of the companies that are involved in this project here at the airport have got between us about 30 years worth of experience in the healthcare sector.
With the pandemic overseas being very, very, very problematic, so like the Indian variant, you've also got you've got the Vietnamese variant and things like that. How important do you think the ability to get tested when you come back as well will be in the near future?
Testing before and after travel, as inconvenient as it might seem, is as imperative as it possibly could be, because as you rightly pointed out, the situation here in the UK is as it is. At the moment, we've got a good level of control. We have a relatively low community infection rate. The worst thing we can possibly do now is take our eye off the ball and allow people to move to and from this country into others and back without having the right checks and balances to keep on top of things. Variants identification is critical, so the government's 2 and 8 day testing program is what's been put in place to control that, to identify not only have you come back and do you have COVID, but what variant of COVID do you have, so they can monitor those levels and act appropriately. When it comes to the pandemic as a whole, I think it's important, and certainly us as a company think it's important, that we view this as a global problem, because until it's globally solved, it's still all of our problems. And unless we want to spend our lives as an island completely isolated from everywhere, testing before and after travel, as I said earlier, as inconvenient as it is an absolute necessity.
Do you think there's room to actually put in testing, a compulsory testing, as soon as you get off the plane? Do you think that would help?
I understand the logic behind the question. I think the challenge is the logistics. Just as an example, here at John Lennon Airport, we've scoped out various different ways of testing. So and John Lennon is a decent sized airport, but obviously nothing of the size of Heathrow, just to test people when they arrive on an average day would require about 25 different testing lanes and nearly 70 staff. So it's not that it wouldn't be helpful. I think it would be incredibly helpful. I think logistically it's really difficult. So there has to be other ways of doing it that may be a bit clunkier for the general population, but actually currently the only way that it works, and particularly when it comes to 2 and 8 day testing, which needs to be PCR, doing that on site when you land could be a little bit tricky. So it's done from home at the moment.
What's the difference between a PCR test and the regular tests that you get from the NHS?
Well, the NHS do PCR tests, but if you're referring to the lateral flow testing, sort of some of the big centres that we've had here in Liverpool, so you're talking about comparing a laboratory with a kid's chemistry set. In terms of the accuracy of those tests, they are completely different. Lateral flow test is not bad, but and at a macro level, when you're talking about huge population testing, they can really help, and we saw that here in Liverpool, particularly over the Christmas period. But when it comes to the individual identification of COVID-19 for the purposes of mitigating outbreaks through travel, we have to be as bulletproof as possible, and the best way to do that is through PCR, which is so much more accurate than a lateral flow test. If we just use lateral flow tests to travel, and particularly if they're used by the person themselves, there are so many failings to that method. You would probably miss more than half the cases of COVID that were actually coming through the airport, and that's well documented by far cleverer people than I.
Why should people come to you and not, say, just order one off the internet?
Good question. So I'm sure people are aware. Obviously, you can have tests delivered from home to home. Sorry. And those are provided by various different labs, and it can be cheaper, not massively cheaper, but cheaper than coming to a facility like ours. We'd encourage people to come and get it done here because you're massively reducing your risk of missing your flight, for want of a better phrase. So you're going to get a lot less unclears, you're going to get a lot less tests going missing in transit. A lot of the tests that we do here are processed here on site as well. So the chances of your results going somewhere where it shouldn't or not happening at all are greatly diminished. So for the extra that it costs to do it here, you're going to get a lot more reliability, a lot more certainty, and hopefully then a lot less stress when it comes to travel. We've had a lot of people come through here in the last 2 weeks booking in on the day or nearly on the day because actually their test hasn't been delivered by the lab, or it's been delivered by the lab, they've done it themselves, they've sent it back, and it's come back unclear because swabbing yourself is actually a really tricky thing to do. And if there is not enough sample on the swab when it gets back to the lab, it will literally just go in the bin. It will come back unclear and you'll be left probably with 24 hours before you fly. So you'll probably end up here anyway to get one of our emergency appointments. So for me, it would definitely be, if it's a holiday, and yes, it costs a little more, but for that little bit extra, you're not gambling with your holiday in the same way that you are if you're reliant on a postal system.
What happens if you do get an unclear?
So it does occasionally happen. The majority of the cases we rerun the test for people. We are one of the few organisations that will do a retest on an unclear, but we don't get very many at all, so it's not something that we have to worry about too much.
Do you charge for a retest?
No, we don't charge for it. So just to build on that, Patrick, around the unclears, if you do order one of the tests from either your airline or from one of the laboratories and you do it at home and you send it off and it's unclear, you won't get a refund or a retest. However, if it happens here and it's something that we've done wrong, which doesn't happen very regularly, but every now and again we actually will, if we have the opportunity to, rerun the test free of charge. We know how stressful air travel is right now. We want to make it as stress-free as possible, and we think that coming here is going to help people with that.
Now, there's a very important point to make about boarding, isn't there?
Yeah, that's correct. So one of the critical parts about Fit to Fly is the timings before you depart. So it's important that all passengers ascertain what window they have to have a test within. So the average at the moment is actually 72 hours, but it's from your departure time. And some people have unfortunately got a little bit confused or not been aware of this and have arrived and been turned away because they've actually had their test done outside of that window. That's then resulted in them having to come back and get a more expensive 1 hour test from providers like ourselves. So if we could ask any of our sort of clients or future clients to be diligent about one aspect, it would be understand what the window looks like in terms of time, and what that then allows you, and book an appropriate appointment so that you're inside the window and you don't get caught out further down the line.
Finally, how long do you reckon testing sites like this will be available to the public?
Good question. I guess $1 million question. We feel as a business, and we've been advised by people within the NHS and within government, that this is going to be happening for 2 to 3 more years at least, probably longer. A lot of it will depend on how well globally we start to control the pandemic and how the numbers come down and are managed, and the continued success of the vaccine programme, not just here in the UK but on a global scale. But I'd imagine we'll be doing testing pre-travel and post-travel for a number of years to come. I will personally be glad if that isn't the case, but at the minute I think, given how important it is and how it's not looking like this is going to be over anytime soon, it's probably going to be here for quite a while.
And the very, very last question, if anybody wants to find out any more information,
Yep.
or get in touch for any reasons about how to get involved with your business, etc., how do they get in touch?
Okay, good question. So the easiest way to find the link, and probably the most easy website for people to remember, will be to go on the Liverpool John Lennon Airport website. There is a link on the homepage there that'll take them through to the booking site. Equally, they can also check the Test Assurance Group website or the Salutaris website, and both links are on there as well. If anyone wants to get involved, and we are recruiting for people at the moment to help us expand our service both here and at other clinics as well, if they have a look at salutaris.com, they can get in touch through the email address on there and send us any questions they may have.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.